Hello, hello, good evening, welcome to another YouTube Live, another month of a competition for WonderBox subscribers and another month with some wonderful guests. Now, today's topic is both highly relevant and interesting, and also something I know very little about, so I'll be relying heavily on my guests to lead us through this. Fortunately, I have got exactly the right people, so I'll pull them in straight away. Here we can see Hannah and Edd. So first of all, welcome both of you. Thank you so much for joining.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So Edd, I met via the community fund process a couple of months ago, so I've known a little bit about his work. And I heard a lot about Hannah through this. This is the first time that we're meeting. So we're going to be talking about sustainability in film photography, the eco-friendly options that are available today, hopefully in the future, the problems of today's practices, and then there are, I think, a million ways we can go off that. We've collected some questions as well in advance from folks, so I'll make sure to weave those in. Please do also chat, comment, and then of course these two lovely people have also picked special mentions and winners for the March WonderBox competition that we'll go through in about half an hour. But let's start with sustainable film photography. Hannah, would you like to start? Introduce yourself. What got you into this world? And then at some point hand over to Edd.
Yeah, with pleasure. So my name's Hannah Fletcher. I'm a artist more than a photographer, I'd say, but currently based in London. So back in kind of June 2019, I ran a kind of a very small residency with just 6 artists where we kind of sat around the table and discussed the possibility of what a sustainable analog photographic practice could look like. And from there, I've kind of continued to develop and grow the project and get some funding and run some more residencies. And from its very humble beginnings, it's now kind of grown into this much more international network. And we're producing kind of publications and holding regular talks and workshops and seminars and giving advice and mentoring. So it's really developed into quite a wide spread and wide-reaching project, which is really exciting. So a year ago today, actually, we ran the second residency, which was among 4 themes, which were remove, repurpose, rework, and recycle. And this is where I got introduced to Edd here. So Edd applied to be on the remove residency, where basically as a group we were researching removing toxic elements from the photographic industry. So this included like toxicity in chemicals, gelatin in films, or plastics on papers. Whereas the other, so as you can kind of imagine from the title of the other weeks, recycle was looking at recycling different elements in the darkroom. Repurpose was looking at using other things which already exist in our environment and how can we kind of incorporate them into the darkroom, whether that's like going through the like recycling bin and making pinhole cameras from, bits and bobs. Mm-hmm. Or whether that's repurposing like leaves from your garden to make anthotype prints. And then the final one was rework, which was a bit more of a theoretical week where we really looked at kind of the whole system and the structures surrounding analog photography, thinking about the ecosystem that the industry exists within and how can we begin to kind of rethink and replace the culture of photography. So in the week that Edd was in rework, he wrote a paper for us, which was great. And if you haven't read it, it is freely available to read, or it's also available on one of our publications. This is still not a solution, it's a publication. Yeah, maybe Edd, and then since then, Edd's kind of gone on to set up a physical space for a northern sustainable darkroom, which is something which the sustainable darkroom in general hasn't got. So it's really nice to have a kind of physical attachment to us. So I'll hand over to Edd to talk more about what he's up to with that, I guess.
Cheers, Hannah, for the introduction. And first I'd like to say thanks to everyone who donated to the community fund, because it helped us buy a shiny new scanning bed, which so we can scan the negatives, show the world what we're doing and stuff like that. So yeah, big thanks to anyone who is watching and may have taken part in that. Cheers. But yeah, like Hannah said, I hadn't really heard of the Sustainable Darkroom from her end in like 2019, 2020, well, start of 2020. But I had been doing some work myself, like I obviously had developed in Caffeinol, which is making your own developer out of coffee. It's probably the most well-known sustainable, non-toxic developer, I should say, because whether it's sustainable or not is another question. But anyway, so from that, I kind of started thinking about film, the materiality of film, and the presence of gelatin in film, specifically animal gelatin. And from there, I wrote a research paper when I was on my master's. So like my master's thesis called The Ecology of Grain, which was a kind of environmental ecological assessment of gelatin in analog film. And that really got me kind of involved and interested in the theoretical side of film and photography, and the not so much like the content of an image and the concept of an image, but the kind of material workings that went on and the physicality of the practice itself, and also the kind of ethical questions that came around that and stuff like that. So anyway, on that basis, I applied to the residencies in 2020 that Hannah set up, and during that residency, I was on the Remove residency, but it was the coronavirus lockdown. They were meant to be physical, but it just happened when the lockdowns. I think it was like a week after, or maybe 2 weeks after the first lockdown, and so I just decided to kind of write a follow-up paper where I interviewed film users, analog photographers, and then kind of put forward this like theoretical, almost like utopian, I guess, ideal of what the kind of like a future for analog photography and photography, perhaps photography in general, that is fully sustainable and incredibly like ecological. So in that, it was kind of proposing this decentralized network of darkrooms that try and like internalize all the processes of film, whether it's the production of the film itself, the development, the waste that's produced, teaching, resources, all those things existing within this kind of network of autonomous darkrooms, which sounds like quite a lofty ideal at the moment. But I think obviously that what Hannah's been doing, and then us having the support up here in Leeds to set up the Northern Sustainable Darkroom as a physical space, and just the general interest that we've had, I'd like to say and be hopeful that I think we could potentially create like a parallel system that exists alongside mainstream photography. So yeah.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. That's a long overview. And while you were doing that, I was trying to screen share, and instead I accidentally deleted that part of the software and then showed my face for a couple of seconds. So hopefully that didn't distract people too much from what was an excellent background. No, that's fascinating. So a few questions. So Hannah, you said you are an artist more than a photographer, which we'll forgive you for. That's fine. But what prompted you then to focus? Because first of all, what would your main medium be then? Is it photography based?
I mean, it's so tricky. I mean, I feel like Edd probably feels the same way. Maybe not, but
yeah.
I never take pictures like with a camera. And the way I approach the medium is very much from like a materials perspective. So I still work with photographic materials, and I would call myself a photographic artist maybe, but I wouldn't call myself a photographer, because that definitely gives this illusion that you know, go around and take photographs. And sometimes I take photographs, you know, if I want to test out like a plant-based developer, or if I'm teaching a workshop making a plant-based developer. But in terms of making my own work, like, I very much just approach the materials as kind of entities in themselves, whether that's like, you know, liquid light emulsion or cyanotype emulsion or photographic paper or just photographic film by itself. I'm much more interested in kind of the way that the photographic surface can interact with organic materials. So I'll often focus on like one organic material at a time. In the past, that's been things like algae or mushrooms or soils. I also do this technique called soil chromatography, which I teach a lot, which is basically a bit of a hybrid between like a scientific technique and a photographic technique. I teach it like as a photographic and technique because it uses silver nitrate. So for me, like, it is a form of imaging using a light sensitive chemical. And you know, photography is just like making things visible with light and materials that can do that. So I take it in a very like a broad sense.
And I suppose that that probably helped you then go down this route, because photographers, myself included, probably don't think of the materials as the constituent parts quite so much. And we might play around with cyanotypes and things, and that's interesting, but it's not like, as you say, your articulation there of creating an image with light and something that reacts to it is a much more fundamental approach than starting with a film or starting with a sensor and going from there.
Yeah, and I think that's why inherently quite a number of people that are involved with the Sustainable Darkroom are also kind of work with alternative processes or are interested in this. And it's quite interesting because I have had questions before where people have said kind of like, oh, most of the expressions I've seen of more sustainable approaches to photography are like alternative approaches. Is that, you know, do they go hand in hand? And I'm like, no, they don't. You can definitely do more conventional photography. It's just, I feel that people that are already, people that are already interested in the materiality of the image making process and naturally, therefore, more interested in this kind of exploration as to like how we can kind of reinvent it.
No, that makes sense. And in other good news, I've got the screen share to work. So we're currently looking at the London Alternative Photography Collection website, which is where the Sustainable Darkroom sits. And we can see here, we can see there's residencies, we can see the talks, including someone by Edd Carr. We can see a lot of things there. And then if we go down, there's your This Is Still Not a Solution. And then even further down, we can see Edd's papers. And actually, someone's asked, Dylan Vieira's asked, with regards to This Is Still Not a Solution, would you republish the book? So is this an ongoing publication? Is this a one-time run, or is this something that you would look at bringing back?
No, so the first, so there are two publications. The first one that I published in 2019, that took about a year to sell out. And just as that one sold out, I launched the second one. And the second one took 1 month to sell out. And so I've been working on getting reprints for like the past few months. And they're actually arriving in about 4 days with me. So both of them will be available again to be sold. The second one, This Is Still Not a Solution, has one additional essay in it. But the other one is the same as it was printed in 2019. But yeah, they'll both should be back available on the website to purchase probably in a week or two.
Brilliant. So Dylan, make sure you've got londonaltphoto.com, and it will be within there under products, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Perfect. And that difference in sellout, 12 months turning to 1 month, do you think there's a wellspring of interest and excitement around this topic at the moment from the community, or was it that you had a bigger audience yourself? What do you think it was down to?
I think it's a combination of things. Like, the first one only encompassed like 6 artists, whereas the second one encompassed about 30 artists. So already there you have a much bigger audience. On top of that, the second one was, being worked on and being contributed to during the lockdown, when therefore everything was much more online, and so we were able to reach a much bigger audience because we were sharing much more, we were doing much more online talks, so automatically you're kind of building up more of an audience. Also, we had a much more international kind of both contribution to it as well as like audience for it. So I think it's kind of a combination of, everything being online, having more artists involved in the second one, but also much more awareness. Like, compared to this time last year, I've seen the kind of movement, if you want to call it that, like, grow tremendously.
No, and that's what I pick up, because obviously we film photography is what we live in every day. And 2 years ago, I don't think anyone had asked me, probably in a year, about ecological implications or which one's better, anything like that. Whereas now it happens weekly, probably. So I think there is a growing awareness. Part of it's obviously down to the work that you're doing. People do reference explicitly the stuff that you guys have produced. But also I think there's also just a general interest in it anyway as people look at it. So Edd, how is the lead site looking? So the summary just before we went live was you don't have a website, but you do have running water, which we decided was probably the right priority.
Yeah, so we can survive if anything catastrophic happens. At least we'll have water to drink. But yeah, no. Actually, can I just follow up on something that Hannah said about? Yeah, I think it is really important. Part of the Sustainable Darkroom, it isn't just like this kind of surface reshaping of, this developer's non-toxic, or this is how you extract silver. It also includes like a kind of reshaping of like what a photographer is and how photography works. And so I think historically photography has been quite this kind of like individualistic and isolated form, where you go out and you have this high-powered machine and you take these things and it freezes this part of life, the kind of classic Kodak moment type thing. But I think with sustainable processes and with alternative processes, it slows photography down a lot more. I mean, typically darkroom practices do, but sustainable practices and alternative practices even more slow things down, and you start to become like aware of every different material part of the process, the water, the paper. I mean, the typical photographer might consider, the roll of film as it goes through his camera, but with the Sustainable Darkroom, you're considering all these different kind of networks and interactions with non-human beings and with the world around you. So I think what's core to the Sustainable Darkroom, beyond the kind of, the developers and the extraction of silver and all that stuff and the fixative, etc., is this kind of reshaping photographers from this isolated being to this kind of like ecological being, this kind of is very present in their ecology and very present in their ecosystem, which aligns with our current realities of like the climate crisis, the ecological crisis, etc. So I was just thinking that when Hannah was talking about her practice, because no,
it makes sense. And also I think that's probably the way that when I hear people talk about choices within food, that feels like where it's moved to as well. Whereas maybe 10 years ago it was maybe simplistic as should we kill animals or not. I mean, I'm sure that's unfair from 10 years ago, but it feels like it's moved from that into more of a, air miles and eating animals there is a range there, and actually food, and when you talk about milk substitutes, oat versus soy versus everything, it's a very different conversation now, and that seems to be what you're referring to again, not just this film has less plastic, but more what you do with it from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think the thing with analog photography historically is that there's this big idea around it, in the past 10 years. I don't know, how long have you guys been working for? How long has Analogue Wonderland existed?
Analogue Wonderland's been less than 3 years. It's 3 years in May. So
like in the noughties, in the 2000s, probably wouldn't have been able to exist because the film industry completely collapsed because of digital. Then in the last decade we've seen this rise in popularity that's made businesses like yours kind of spring up, like independent darkrooms, etc. And people were talking about this whole renaissance with photography, this revolution where analog photography is coming back because of it was being sold in, was it Urban Outfitters? You could buy film cameras and stuff like that. But that's one word that kept popping out to me, but I found that it really didn't agree with that idea that it was a renaissance, because it wasn't departing from what analog photography used to be, which is still really toxic, still involving all these destructive processes. And so I think with the Sustainable Darkroom and what Hannah has started, and the work she does and the work we're starting to do in Leeds and stuff, is it's probably the most contemporary kind of form of analog photography. And I think it is, if we're talking about renaissance within photography, then this is kind of a more genuine one. Do you know what I mean?
No, I totally agree. Renaissance suggests innovation and change. Resurgence is something coming back from where it was. So you're right. I think it's fair to pick up on it. I mean, it's brilliant that you guys are thinking about it in this way, because I think that's definitely what's needed. When I talk to film photographers about it, I think a lot of people, myself included, probably on a personal level, are not quite at that stage. Maybe because we don't own the whole process necessarily ourselves. We use labs, or if we home develop, we have a couple of different ones, or we do a mix. So when people come, and these are going to be then slightly more simplistic, but someone's asked here, George Glennie has called it out, and it was one of the questions that came before. How likely is a gelatin-free film? I mean, he also says if one comes out, it would be my go-to. Someone had asked me on Instagram, vegan film, which presumably gelatin is probably the biggest part of that, but if there's anything else. How likely is it? What are the barriers from a physical point of view, or a technology point of view? And then separately, obviously, there's going to be the business barriers of someone having to actually manufacture it at scale. But let's focus on that one for a minute, because I think that would be obviously a massive game changer.
Do you want to answer, Hannah?
I mean, Ed's done a lot of research on gelatin, obviously writing his thesis on it. But from my perspective, it's really tricky because we're approaching this as a group of artists, and we really need it's scientific innovation, more than what artists can do. And so one thing that I am really trying to do is link up kind of scientists to creative practitioners that want to push this. I know numerous people that have tried making emulsions using agar, not very successfully so far. Successfully with other photographic emulsions, whether that's cyanotype, things like that. Completely doable with agar and kind of substitutes. I mean, I feel like it's in society we have come up with, so many innovations that something that's as old as a gelatin emulsion, like, surely, just needs to have the right people working on it.
Yeah.
And it can't be that big a task. In all honesty, I don't know that much about the construction of it, if you like. I know that, having talked to a few people, it's really specific that it has to be bovine gelatin, because it's specific grade and kind of consistency. But I've also been talking to the owner of iWe Film in Bristol, and she seems pretty sure that kombu could be like a possible alternative to gelatin.
Oh, is that Marina?
Yeah, Marina.
Yes. I saw her developing film with Basil. Was it Instagram Live at the weekend?
Okay, nice. I didn't know she'd done that. Yeah, so I've been in contact with her. She, has worked in a lot of film labs and is really keen to start doing some research and input into it as well. And I just feel like the more kind of people start to think about it, then the closer we're going to get to it possibly happening. I think a lot of, when I've kind of emailed people that make their own gelatin emulsions in the past, saying have you considered a plant-based alternative or something like that, they're just deadpan responses. Why would I do that?
Yeah. So opening minds is a step one. I mean, we'll come on to Edd, because I know, Edd, one of your papers was literally on this, but it did suddenly make me realise that actually, I don't know whether Washi V and Washi W then have anything in, because they're liquid emulsion painted into paper. So actually, I wonder whether
it should. I imagine it will do. If it's liquid emulsion, it'll probably be gelatin based.
It will be. Damn. Okay. So go on then, Edd. So your thoughts. When can we sign up to a vegan film?
I thought, doesn't one exist already, Hannah?
So there was this girl that we found online who was making vegan colour film. This was actually something that came up in the Facebook group online, making photographic processes more sustainable. It basically turns out that she's a scam.
Oh, really?
Damn.
She was claiming a whole host of things that she couldn't back up, and a couple of people did some very good internet research on her, and it was great.
Okay, right. We'll say no more. So yes, if someone tries to sell you color vegan film on the internet,
really?
Do not report it to the police.
Yeah, because I was thinking it was so for such a historic innovation, it was
I say colour film as well. That's ballsy. It'd be like going, yeah, we've got E6. It's vegan slide. Don't worry about it. It's for £3 a roll.
I know a number of people that bought it as well, being very excited.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so it's probably going to be a little while, sadly. So let's talk then again. The questions that have come in then is, with all that in mind, and obviously the more that big companies in particular can get behind this, the faster things will move. But as it stands today, someone's environmentally aware, eco-aware, loves film photography. What would you recommend the lowest footprint? You're grinning, Edd. So let's start with you. Edd, what would you recommend as the...
Well, obviously, yeah, when you write, because most of my work within the Sustainable Darkroom is theoretical and research. I'm writing another research paper at the moment, and I think there's always that conclusion, where you spend 50 pages or whatever, write deconstructing the film industry and deconstructing the medium, and then being like, do I now say at the end, like, you should stop shooting film? You know what I mean? But I personally, I don't believe that. I mean, I genuinely believe that there is a third way. It's not a yes or no kind of answer. It's not abandon photography completely. But if you were to just kind of like listen to the criticisms, much like with the climate crisis and the ecological crisis, I think if you look at there's always this focus on like, this is bad and these particular aspects are bad, and not enough focus on the alternative futures. And I think with what the Sustainable Darkroom is doing and what Hannah has founded and set up, that there is a third way. It's just at the moment it's very much in the early stages. I think if you're a dedicated film user, there are ways to reduce your impact generally, whether it's bulk loading, probably not something I should say when on your live stream, but I bulk load all my stuff. I use like Polypan F, which I think is like old cinema stock, like terrible stock. But yeah, bulk loading, making your own developer, certain things you can do with fixative, etc. So there are
So actually, this is one, because I was talking about this again. This topic comes up 2 days ago with some people, and I mentioned the thing that you'd said to me, Ed, which made me think at the time, and I've mulled over ever since, is when you were like cathinol, and you're like, that's the most eco, and actually you've done it today as well, and then you stop yourself and go, no, sorry, it's the least toxic. It's not necessarily environmentally friendly because instant coffee isn't that, and I was like, damn, that's right. So go on then. So if you're, and we've talked about this as well as within the Northern Sustainable Darkroom, having a allotment or greenhouse attachment so you can grow your own developer, what can you grow, or what can you use to develop your film that is the most pure environmentally friendly?
Hannah, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing is to not even grow things specifically, actually just to go out and use the weeds which are in abundance near you. So if you're by the sea, this could be like seaweeds that have washed up on the beach. They don't even have to be alive and foraged. They could be ones that are just washed up and not being used.
So what's the active ingredient then? Because I think for people who don't know much about this, they start off and thinking, well, developer that sold to me from Kodak from Ilford must have some chemistry in there, and then they hear coffee, and then they hear red wine, then they hear basil, then they hear seaweed you found on the floor. So what's the ingredient in there that's active that actually develops the film, and how do you bring it out?
In all of these elements, all of the plants, the coffee, the wine, is a phenol called caffeic acid, which has a very similar structure to things like hydroquinone, which are found in your commercial developer. So when mixed with vitamin C and washing soda, those three things basically create a very similar kind of activity as to what your commercial developer would be doing. It's basically, if you were to break down the molecular structure of what all the elements in your commercial developer look like, people have found the most similar structures that exist in nature and kind of thrown that at film or paper.
And what's presumably then there's a downside, otherwise this would be the preferred option for commercial developers as well.
I mean, the downside, I guess, is it's very hard to get consistency. So because plants, vary according to where they're picked, the time of year they're picked, whether they're dry or fresh, or what soil they're grown in. All of these factors affect the kind of internal chemistry of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you have a recipe which you know is good and you use it on the same film every time, you're still likely to get, you know, slight variations each time you make it, because you're always working with a new plant. Whereas, you know, synthesized chemicals, they're completely uniform. You're not going to get any variation. But I think this is something that we just need to embrace a bit more, to be honest. You know, like, it's not it once you've done, you know, your research and you know that a certain measurement and a certain plant works well with a certain film that you like to shoot, it's really easy to test that yourself and get, you know, your timings down, so you get the contrast you want, you get, you know, the you know, you can bring down your fogging. There's lots of different tweaks that you can do to make it like your ideal developer, and for it to kind of develop the way you want it.
And I suppose then that makes it, that to me that sounds like you know, cooking, baking, that kind of thing as well, where
exactly
the ingredients obviously are from a similar thing, plant-based, but also people talk about having their own recipe for banana bread or whatever it is that they've honed based on their specifics. And I guess there's probably a similar analogy.
It's completely that, because also your water affects it. So like, you know, your water is a certain pH at different places in the country or in the world. So you're going to have a slightly different recipe to someone else who has, you know, different type of water. So you test the pH of your water before you make your developer, and all these different things. And it's really just about, like, as Ed was saying earlier, it's about understanding our environment and like how our practice exists within our environment and how it exists in kind of symbiosis with it.
And I think as well, there are, even as you say that, there are photographers who film soup, and film soup is by definition not a consistent or it's not a process that you can reproduce film on film. So the person who wants to shoot paneth in the way they've shot it for 40 years, get exactly results, this probably isn't going to be there for them at the moment. You hope in the future commercial companies will be able to standardize things. But there are a load of photographers in the community today who already do loads of random stuff when they're shooting, and then put it through a very accurate scientific process, when actually, why not include that as part of the fun of a tactile, unpredictable hobby? Okay, I'm conscious of time, so we probably should move to the judging soon, but I think we could talk about this for hours. A couple of other really quick ones. Well, first of all, is there somewhere that somebody who's listened to this says, right, I am going to go find some seaweed, find some mint, and make it themselves? Is there like a recipe place where that lives?
Yeah, so there are some simple recipes there's definitely a seaweed one, there might be a mint one in the publications. Okay. And I know that the publications aren't back in stock yet, but there is a digital version online. Otherwise, I can recommend going on to Daggy Brundert's website, which is Yumyum Soups.
Yumyum Soups?
Yeah, Yumyum Soups. .de, I think. And we found it.
Yep, there we go. Right, I'll pull this up.
So she works with moving image rather than photographic film, but all of the recipes can be oh
my god, Super 8. If you're going to stretch it, yeah. Oh wow, okay, so moss, rapeseed, aubergine, oranges, wow, okay. Dandelion, blimey, okay.
So yeah, Daggy's has been involved with the Sustainable Darkroom quite a bit, and she does a lot of great work with moving image. There's quite a big scene, to be honest, of people that develop in plant-based chemistries in kind of moving image, whether that's 16 mil, Super 8. I feel like that was actually, you know, going a lot kind of before it came into photography, because a lot of the stuff that I've learned has come from like, you know, cinematographers over people working with photography.
Brilliant. Okay then, and also I think it's probably easy as well for people who are looking, if you're watching this and you're interested but you're not quite sure where to find or something, then of course you can also just ping these two guys in particular. I'm sure they'd be happy to direct you or to talk you through it. So the one last thing then, the one thing before we move on is, because it came up time and time again, Fixer. What is at the moment, again, the best way that people can responsibly fix their images?
I can share my thoughts first. I think that what commercial fix is made of primarily, which is sodium thiosulfate, is actually all not that terrible in itself. Like, it's used, although I don't agree with fertilizers being used on like crops. I'm more interested in like other types of farming. Sodium thiosulfate is used as a crop fertilizer. So, you know, like it goes on our plants. So surely it's not that environmentally harmful to use on our film. What is then more of the issue is all of the silver going into the photographic fixer and making sure that we're properly recycling that. So I think, you know, I wouldn't demonize photographic fixer. I think it is demonized quite a lot, but actually it's fairly simple to recycle silver from the sodium thiosulfate, and you can make your own sodium thiosulfate fix rather than buying a commercial one. You can literally just buy sodium thiosulfate, and then you know that there's nothing else in your fixer. A lot of the bottles do have other things along with the sodium thiosulfate which aren't that good, but essentially all you need is the sodium thiosulfate. That will do the job, and then you can recycle the silver yourself at home using things like wire wool or copper, or there are like trickle tanks that exist that you can buy online, or you can send it off to some, you know, a silver reclamation place.
And there are actually as well, when I've had this conversation before, some local councils offer it explicitly within their local waste disposal. Now again, you'd have to look that up, because some of them have better or worse chemical processing. Because I think that's the reason it's demonized is because it's the idea of you're basically pouring microparticles of silver down the sink that ends up in fish. That's clearly bad. Whereas what you're saying is, well, the core chemistry isn't terrible. Yes, pouring all that silver away, but you can reclaim that. Would you then be able to reuse the fixer, or would it still be? So if you've pulled the silver out, does that then reactivate it, or is that?
You would typically exhaust the fix before you then try and extract the silver. So yeah, because that's when I think that's exhausted when there's like a maximum amount of silver in it. So yeah.
But then when you've then extracted silver from it, is it then something benign that you'd pour away, or would you then try and reuse it as fixer, or is that a step too far?
Yeah, I'd probably dispose of it. Not like down the sink, but I'm not sure actually. Like, yeah, I suppose you could, like you said, Hannah, it does have a sodium thiosulfate does have a low toxicity, but don't some of the rapid fixes have ammonium thiosulfate in?
Yeah, exactly. Some of them have other things and like hardening fixes. So that's why I say, you know, actually you can just make your own fix by just buying sodium thiosulfate online.
That might take a bit longer to fix it, but it'll ultimately do the job of fixer, which is getting it archive ready, won't have fogging later in life. Perfect. Okay.
You can make fix. You can fix, well, you can use salt water, but it takes like 24 hours and it's not really fixing it. I don't think it doesn't do the same thing.
Yeah. So what using salt fix does, it's basically a different process. So whereas your sodium thiosulfate literally strips your unused silver particles out of the paper and leaves them all in the chemistry, a salt basically like neutralizes or deactivates any of those unused silver halides in the paper, so they're still existing in the paper. So that's why, like, it's a bit different, because I guess there is a slight risk that, you know, something might happen and they might reactivate and
they're exposed and then you accidentally develop them.
I don't know, but essentially it is able to, you know, deactivate all of those unused silver particles, but it takes a lot longer because it's doing a different function. It's not just stripping them out, you know, it's got to like neutralize them or denature them or whatever you want to call it. So it takes like 24 hours for the salt to do this. So I don't know if you would call it a photographic fixer, because it's not a direct kind of comparison, whereas the plant-based developer is a direct comparison between commercially produced developer. They're doing exactly the same function.
And I think that then goes to the point of like
different function.
Yeah, got it. So it's a slightly different function. I guess it's back to then the whole practice thing, because if I'm taking photos that are someone's wedding photos on film, probably wouldn't use that method. But if it's a case of I'm testing a new film where I'm trying things out, and I'm going to scan them fairly recently afterwards, and ultimately that's where they'll live for a while. If I come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to make prints of them in 5 years regardless, it doesn't matter as much, then frankly the difference between the methods is fairly negligible for that project, for that roll of film. That's brilliant.
Yeah, completely. And I think that's a good, like, it's good to be able to assess, like, maybe what function you've used the film for, and therefore like how you should treat it. Like, does all work need to be archivable for hundreds of years? No, you might maybe have one roll of film that you want to be archivable, or a few pictures, but like the majority of stuff, it doesn't need to be able to, you know, last forever.
Well, Hamish from 35mmc is fairly infamous for throwing away his negatives as soon as he gets them back.
Really?
So I'm going to have a chat with him and say, mate, you should stop fixing. Shove them in salt water and then get them scanned and then do it that way. That makes sense. So what we'll probably move on to the judging now. I think we are going to go past 9 o'clock if you guys are both okay for another probably 10 minutes after that. But the things then that I really want to make sure, because there's lots of people who are adding comments, saying it's important to talk about this, asking for links to recipes, etc. So what we'll do, obviously, is I will link your website, Hannah, Edd, your Instagram, where people can message you, contact you, and follow you as well as you move from water to electricity. I think you said was next before you worry about the internet. So that's definitely one thing. Is there also, if someone has loved this and would love to spend more, myself included, is any talks coming up, Hannah, that will cover this kind of stuff specifically, or are they more focused? What's the best way people can continue to learn this journey?
Yes, so I think the best thing is just to follow the Sustainable Darkroom's Instagram, which is at Sustainable Darkroom. And we will have some talks coming up. I don't have any scheduled right this minute to plug, but there definitely will be a number coming up soon.
Perfect. Brilliant. And then Edd.
Yep.
Northern Sustainable.
Oh, well, I know we're, as in, when are we opening and stuff? I think we should be ready by the end of this month to kind of start. Yeah. So there is electricity. That was a joke. No, everything's really been installed now. It's just like, putting the enlarger and other stuff in there now. So yeah, but I know me and Hannah and a couple of others, we're setting up a Patreon type thing. Mm-hmm. So there'll be a lot of talks and workshops, etc., coming out of that. I think one thing we also want to offer in the Northern Sustainable Darkroom as a facility down the line is COVID depending obviously, but is like a kind of like residency program where people can like freely and hopefully with a small budget use the darkroom and then have their work exhibited at the end of it. So yeah, hope lots of exciting stuff.
Oh, I think road trip to Leeds as soon as this is over, and we can all either chip in to help finish it off or enjoy the start of it. Regardless. No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you, for going through that. I mean, I've learned a huge amount in a very short space of time, and will be doing my next few walks through the countryside with half an eye on randomly scavenging. Well, seaweed's a bit of a stretch from Oxfordshire, but I'm sure I can find some mint. Okay then, brilliant. Well, what we'll do then, so we're going to go through the judging. If folks have any other questions specifically for Hannah and Edd that we think we can quickly answer within this, then please do pop them in the comments and I'll see. Martin, I've seen your request for links for recipes for Fixer. We'll follow that up one probably afterwards. It is over the weekend now, so it'll take me a while probably to write the description for the YouTube and throw all the links up, but we will put a lot of resources there for everyone who is interested. Okay then, so on to the competition time. So for folks who need reminding why we're here for this part, so obviously all WonderBox subscribers have entered a lot of photos in the last month that are just photos taken on WonderBox films. I owe several of you an apology because I didn't update the form, so a lot of you had to put the wrong film in there and tell me what it was actually in the comments. That's entirely my bad, but I've seen all of those. And what we say is when we give them to judges, I deliberately give them no criteria. They pick several ones that catches their eye. Out of that, they choose a winner. The fact that the two of them have collaborated means you've had even more eyeballs on these than ever. So I've seen already what they've gone. It's a wonderful, wonderful range. So we're going to dive straight in. On each one, I'm going to ask Edd and Hannah what caught their eye. What did they like about it? I'll pull in any of the comments that we saw from the form. And then we'll rattle through fairly quickly. So we're not going to hit the 9 o'clock deadline, but we'll go through it at a reasonable pace to make sure that we're all in bed in a decent time. Okay, there we go. Oh, by the way, I also coined a phrase for you two, the sustainable shooters, which I hope you're not offended by. I was trying to think of a way of combining it.
I did find it quite entertaining though, because I've been talking about how I don't take photographs.
I know. Oh, how embarrassing. So it needs to be something artists. I'll come back to that. Okay, right then. So the first special mention. So hopefully everyone can see the show that's coming through here and that you guys can follow along. So number 1. What did you like about this particular photo from Aideen McFadden?
Edd, do you want to go first?
Did you choose this one?
Maybe I chose this one.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I really like images that kind of make you question a bit what's going on, and this is definitely one of them. So it's a kind of mixture of like shadow play, it could be a double exposure. It's just like very strong and kind of makes you look at it a bit longer than something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Aideen is a regular special mention and winner. Let me just pull out the details. So it's Ilford Delta that she has gone to. It is a double exposure. She said it works in a way I totally didn't expect. In fact, I'd forgotten I'd taken the original photo of the orchid. So it was a nice surprise, which, yes, that makes sense. No, Aideen's work is exceptional. I really, really love it, and it's often the doubles. So that's absolutely lovely. Edd, anything to add?
Yeah, no, the thing I'm just looking at is like, obviously it's a double exposure. In the background, you've got this shadow, which doesn't look like it's from an orchid plant. And then you've got the orchid, and it kind of does create this like, like captivating like confusion where you're just like, is that the shadow of an orchid being held? And I love like the shadow where like the space in the arm that just kind of like shoots up and like cuts the orchid. It's really like defined, yeah. So
it's quite yin and yang as well, isn't it? Because you've got that shadow that shoots up, offset by one that comes down. You've got light on dark, dark on light.
Yeah.
Wonderful balance. And then she's like, I forgot I'd done the first one.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Brilliant.
The best way, I think.
Aideen, you should shoot more orchids and then forget about it if they turn out like this. Yeah. Awesome stuff. Okay then, Hannah Danfer. a very simple photo. What do you like about this?
I think it was I think that's the wrong image. I think it was the horse image that she took
Okay.
that we put on there. Yeah.
Apologies, there's a mix-up. So Hannah, you do have an image in here. It's not this one, but I like this one anyway.
Yeah, I like this one as well. So
no, it's shot on Pro Image. Really liked the film. I don't know if you guys shot much on Pro Image?
No.
Back in the day, I think. Yeah. I don't shoot any color anymore because
I was about to say, do you guys both lean towards now black and white?
Well, you can't. There's no like sustainable chemistry for color, so yeah. Which something we should have mentioned actually.
That's true. Actually, I'd forgotten to mention it. Yes, you're right. Everything that we've said so far is black and white. So Hannah, apologies. That's my mistake then for getting the wrong photo. I will, when we release this, correct that correct credit. Okay, so Peter Jenkins, who I believe I've seen in the comments as well, so hopefully he's stuck around to see this. Is this the right photo first and foremost?
Yeah.
Yes. All right, we're back on track. And this is called The Librarian.
Great. I didn't even read that title when I chose it.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I don't think actually those titles I don't think are visible because I just send the images across. I don't. So the people, the judges, just for everyone's background, the judges don't get to see actually the names, the films, anything like that. They can only judge it on the aesthetic. But yes, so this is called the Librarian. It's shot on Kodak Ultramax. And Peter really enjoyed the contrasts that came through out of this. So what captured it? What captured your eye there?
I think for me it was just this kind of bright, garish flash, like, you know, covering this whole woman and really like illuminating her in this quite strange and surreal way. And then, you know, it's quite an odd scene behind her with the chairs and the plants and the books, and she's kind of leaning on this plant which looks like it wouldn't be able to kind of support her. It looks like it would just I don't know, you don't really see people kind of putting their weight on like the edge of a plant pot. To me,
Yes.
it just looked like it would just like flip forward or something. So yeah, just like a really interestingly kind of composed and lit shot.
Yeah, I really like the colors. Like obviously she's ginger like me, and then that's not why I liked it, but yeah.
That's enough. You're like, I recognise myself in this.
But like the contrast with that, with the carpet and like the blue carpet, and then, you know, the fact that she's a librarian as well. Like, I wish my librarian looked that cool. You know, do librarians look this cool? Maybe I haven't been in enough libraries. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a strong library fashion. No,
Yeah.
and you look at the flash, the shadow that's gone back. That is a powerful old beast that they've thrown on that.
Yeah. What film stock is it?
Ultramax.
Oh, okay.
Ultramax.
Did they say what camera they used?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I was thinking, is
And,
that
and the
like-
advice, actually, although I also say, you know, is there any advice you'd pass on to other photographers about this film specifically? And Peter said, shoot it carefully. I mean, I'd argue that power of flash isn't necessarily careful, and it's a cracking image. So
Yeah, it's worked. Don't shoot it carefully would be my advice.
Yes, exactly. But no, you're right. The hair really jumps out because the flash has washed out a lot of the colour. But that's stuck. Cracking. All right then, Luke Farmer, who I've definitely seen hunting around the comments and was one of the recent winners.
Yeah, I chose this one. I think. I think I was like, "Is this a double exposure?" And I was like, "No, he's taking it through a window, I assume." But obviously, you know, in a very basic way, it looks like he has the face of a cat. So, I've worked with animals all my life, and worked in like animal shelters and stuff. And so I've known many people that wish they had the face of a cat, or wish they were cats, in fact. So this guy seems to have done it with his photography. So that's why. And I also like the tonal. It's very soft, and I like soft images, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is yes, exactly. So on that note, someone's written quite an insightful comment, which is in all capitals, cat. Thank you, Mel. That's really got to the heart of this photo, I think. Yes, no, absolutely. So it's shot on ADOX HR50, which is quite a contrasty film. And there we go. That's what it said. Yeah, without too much grain. And there we go. So I was trying to take a picture of my cat through the window. I didn't mean for his face and chest to line up with my reflection. I only realised when I developed it, and then it made me laugh.
Yeah. It's interesting. They have a section on their website about is film suitable for vegans? So just a weird. Yeah, I used it. I remember it was like one of the springboards for my research. But yeah, just an interesting ADOX connection there. And it's kind of like a rant on the website. It's a bit like,
really?
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't take that much gelatin.
We only have a small paddock of cows at the back. Stop complaining.
Yeah, say all. But yeah, anyway, cool.
No, brilliant. Made me smile.
Yeah.
Okay, Janice Webb.
I think I chose this one again. I'm just like a real like sucker for composition, and like I just love how it's kind of come from the the bottom left of the image, and then it just kind of like sprawls all the way through. And I'm also like in a very cliched way like trees, like environmental guy likes trees. So yeah, so really that's why I chose it, because I like trees and I like composition, and it's got both of those things, and it's black and white, so who knows, it could have been developed in mint.
Exactly. Maybe. Well, she says it's Kentmere film. There's no details about the development, but let's take that fully through. Well, actually, it's funny because last month it was Hamish, and we had a whole discussion about how a lone tree in a photo is enough to win awards in my book every single time. So clearly you're from the same school of thought. Hannah, did you have any thoughts about this film?
No, I think I just echo some of Edd's thoughts. I also quite enjoy the kind of grey tonal range. I think quite often, like photographers tend to steer towards high contrast, and actually sometimes having a much more kind of soft grey tonal range can be very appealing.
Yeah, well, it was one of Ansel Adams' sessions, wasn't it, to make sure you had it all the way through. And apparently it is also something, I remember talking to a photography tutor who said, especially with Analogue, you can tell immediately the difference between a year 1 and a year 3 student, because the contrast is you start high and you learn, and then you learn the subtlety, which in fairness is probably true of a lot of different art. And music, you probably start sound loud and soft, and then you learn the bits in between. But yes, no, really, really gorgeous. So well done, Janice. Lawrence Arnold. We've got sprockets. Gotta love sprockets.
Yeah, I was definitely drawn to the sprockets. And I don't know, is it a pinhole image?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think like you can tell that from the image going across the sprockets, which is always nice. I'm obviously always drawn to kind of images where you can see a bit of the material kind of process, or the way that the image was formed. So this one definitely kind of appealed to that.
No, got it. Do you want to have a stab at which film it is?
I would have no clue, honestly.
I mean, it's also quite a niche one, so if you'd gone for this, I'd be boggled. But I think it's interesting because it's one of the FPP films, low ISO. So this is actually an ISO 6 film. And I don't know whether if someone gave me an ISO 6 film, I would think, I'll put it in a pinhole.
Yes, her exposure time must have been insane.
Well, exactly. You get an ISO 6 and you're like, you know what this needs? A tiny aperture. But no, it's come out absolutely brilliant. He said the thing that he enjoys most about this photograph is that the wind died down enough for it to be reasonably sharp, which I think is probably a good point, because I'm guessing the exposure was in minutes rather than seconds.
Do you think they developed it themselves as well?
Yeah.
Just because there's a line, the line at the bottom looks like potentially like chemistry or
Yeah.
leftover. Do you know what I mean?
No, exactly. Well, also, I can imagine that the number of labs that can accept this type of film while exposing the sprockets and scanning them is fairly niche. I think you probably would home develop it by that point. Not sure. We'll have to ask. I don't think I've seen his name in the comments, but Lawrence, if you're watching, let us know. Did you home develop it? If so, which plant did you use? Okay, let's keep going through. Chun Ho Mok.
I think I chose this one.
Mm-hmm.
Just like again, it's a God, I'm so
It's a solitary tree. It's a tree. It's going from bottom left to top right.
It's also my favorite tree as well. I think, yeah, it's a mountain ash, and so yeah, which is obviously one of my favorite trees. And then just like the colors from the berries and the contrasting colors and the composition. So yeah, probably one of my favorite images out of the lot, actually, I have to say. But I do have a close connection to those trees. So yeah.
No, it is gorgeous, and the berries to be that bright from what's clearly an undershot is it's really impactful. But you can see it, the leaves further up almost fade into the white. It's quite peaceful. Brilliant. Okay, Erin Savage.
Did we both choose this one?
Possibly. Yeah, I think the lighting's really nice on this. Like it's obviously taken at night, but and then there's kind of mix of street light and flash maybe. And it just seems very, very kind of peaceful. Yeah, I don't know, like I think snow is naturally kind of like quite peaceful, and then so it's just something about the whole image feels just like quite quiet, and you can almost feel kind of being there, I think, in this street.
No, definitely. I mean, when I first saw the dots, my first thought was like a double exposure with lights or something, but then actually you can see as the ones further away are smaller, it's really cool, and to have captured it at that level as well, out of focus snowflakes as they fall. Yeah, I've always thought that, especially snow in London. I mean, I don't know if this is London, but it's a town or city street. Definitely quietens things down. Okay then. Oh, and then the final one, which actually I think was a one that I lobbed in towards the end, the Snappy Mole, whose name was also the Snappy Mole. So this is a photographic mole. Yeah, they'd put a couple in, and actually the first one I was drawn to wasn't this one. It was a black and white one that had a similar sort of strong composition, strong shapes, and a solitary person in the middle. But then I kept coming back to this one because I think I really like the colours, really like the detail. I love the composition and the framing. I think that would have been so easy to get wrong or think it's too complicated to try and use these railings, but I think it's done really, really subtly. There's graffiti on the railings that then sort of mirror to some extent the one in the background. And then, of course, there's the question of, is the guy in the midst of adding to that wall or something else entirely? I mean, it must be adding to it because that's where the green is. But yeah, I think there's enough of a story and enough of a composition. Leading lines, there we go. Doesn't go from the bottom left, comes from the top right. So Ed doesn't like it for that reason, but apart from that.
Yeah, is that shot on Lomachrome purple?
Oh, Mel's just pinged me exactly the same question. Let me have a look. Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
And okay, here we go. So it's called Urban Spirits. What advice would you pass on to other photographers? The Snappy Mole is remarkably humble for, as I say, this wasn't the only photo that I nearly put in here. He's clearly got a few. I've only been doing photography for about a month. You'd be an idiot to take my advice. Well, that's quite hard on yourself because we love it. So If this is 1 month in, Snappy Mole, I'm very excited to see what you create after a couple of years. Okay, thank you so much. Those are the special mentions. So well done to everyone who has been mentioned so far. We now move on to the Lucky Dip, which is a computer-generated winner each month from all of that month's entrants. So you're always in for a chance to win. The Lucky Dip winner does get prizes as well. The special mentions get pride, and the mention but no prizes was Lucky Dip winner gets it. And this month's Lucky Dip winner, and we definitely have seen her here, it's Mel Robinson with a really lovely photo. Again, one that tells a story. So is that a demolished house where A, the doors survived when the walls and roof haven't, and B, has been taken over by so much vegetation that's clearly not a modern thing? I don't know, but I really like the colours and the shape of the door, and the fact that there's a story, and the bird in the top right as well as a lovely extra bit of detail. So even though this was a Lucky Dip winner, when I saw it, I absolutely loved it. I don't know what you guys' reaction is to it first up.
Yeah, me too. It's a really interesting image, and I think like naturally with landscapes you go to shoot them landscape, but I really like this in kind of portrait, mimicking the door frame and that kind of the railings in front being cut really short. Like part of you kind of wonders, how far do they extend? Like, you want to see the other sides of the landscape naturally. So it's quite nice having that limitation of just this strip view.
You're right. So actually, that's a brilliant point. So I think if I was faced with this, my instinct would be to shoot horizontal to get more of that in. But the choice to then put the sky and then that white line in the front that mirrors the railing angle is really beguiling. Okay, let's see what Mel's written. Again, another insightful comment, which is door, all capital letters. So we've got the subject. I don't know why I'm being mean to you this week, Mel. I'm sorry. It is lovely. So the true title is Doorway to the Past, Portrait 400. She said about the film, it may be slightly overhyped, but honestly, it's a film you can depend on to turn out well. Here we go, a bit more story. So it's a factory behind it that's in ruins. And the thing that really caught her eye was the composition, as we've talked about, but also the contrast between a relatively intact doorway and an entire factory in ruins behind it. So, I mean, there we go, Hannah. I mean, I'd love to see the rest of it. Okie dokes. So Mel, I will be in touch with you about a prize. I know that you have several camera options, so I'll speak to you about which one needs some food at the moment, and we'll work out what you have. But there will be some film winging its way very shortly after Easter. Okay, and the other person who will have film winging its way to them is going to be. Oh, hang on a minute. This is where I have my incredible sound effects. So this is going to be quite. There we go. Look at this. There we are. And Hunter Scott. Congratulations, Hunter Scott. Here we go. There we are. So, did you both combine to choose a winner? Did one of you get final say? How did you come to this image?
Well, Hannah chose it first and sent me her selections, and then I agreed, basically. So, yeah. But now I really
didn't agree with all of them. So it was like a combined choice of winner.
It's a collaboration.
Yeah.
Lovely. So what prompted this film this photo to rise to the top of the pile?
So I just thought like the light first off is just really spot on. And it's just kind of the balance of colours and the compositions. It's got a lot of things going for it, and then you also have an interesting character there. I really like this kind of picture of the CCTV camera kind of pointing at him, and it brings up all these ideas of kind of surveillance and kind of building work of like capitalization, if you like, and what about for you, Ed?
I agree with all that. the colours and everything. Again, the CCTV sign, like pointing at him, and surveillance photography, all those things. I also like, at first, like, I think instinctively you'd think he'd crop out, like, the background, or like the top of the image above the kind of, but I think the more I look at it, the more like being that in does add an extra layer, like in terms of the story of the image, and like what are they developing? Is it like in London? Is it like a new development type thing in like an old neighborhood or whatever? So yeah, it's great shot.
Yeah, and you've got like the burglar alarm that again mimics the front part of it, and what seems to be nice terraced housing then turning into scaffolding. No, there's a huge amount. So Hunter actually was one of the winners, I think, back in November, with another sort of, and I'd probably put this under street photography if we had to bucket it, and another one as well. So Hunter, well done. You've clearly got a great eye for wandering about and finding these moments and taking it. I think from memory, the last one was a guy playing a tuba, but like there were flames coming out of the tuba. But he was wearing like a really formal suit. It was bizarre and very, very intriguing. This is equally intriguing, but much more subtle, but still absolutely gorgeous. So let's have a quick look. Taken on Pro Image again. This film is awesome. Highlights look great. Shadows look great. Can't believe I've never shot it before. No, that's a good point actually as well, because the colours come through even when the door of the shadow could easily knock that off. And about the photo in particular, shot it at a longer focal length than usual. Timed it so he was looking into the lens, and it was only when I got the scans back did I realise that there was another camera pointing at him. So another one where thought's gone into the composition and the timing, and then that fortuitous bit you didn't necessarily notice at the time makes it. So huge congratulations, Hunter. Again, I'll be in touch with the prizes that will be coming out on Teresa. Wonderful. Guys, thank you so much. That is a wonderful selection of different images. More trees than average, but now we know why. But we had colour, black and white, we had portraits, we had people. Really lovely mix. So thank you so much for the time, first of all, in advance to go through and look at them. There are huge amounts of photos that get submitted that are really good quality. I know it's a lot of work, so thank you for that time. Thank you for the time this evening chatting to us. As I say, I will post links when this goes up on YouTube proper to your various Instagrams, the various websites. I am sure you will be inundated with further questions. I didn't see any other quick questions come up, so we'll probably wrap it up here. Is there anything else that you would like to mention or talk about or tell people to go to that we haven't covered already? Is there a YouTube channel? Hannah, do you have a YouTube channel? I think we'd said.
So we put out some videos on the London Alternative Photography Collective's YouTube channel. So that's just London Alt Photo, if you want to look that up on YouTube. And that's got all the archives of all the talks that we've run. And many of them are focused around the Sustainable Darkroom. So if you want to hear kind of hear from any artists who are kind of working with us, or there are talks which cover specific topics such as like recycling or silver or different things like that, then you can check those out there.
Brilliant. Edd, Instagram?
Yeah, you can watch me do a talk on gelatin as well on the London Alt Photo YouTube.
Brilliant. Okay.
So if you're really interested in cow bones, then that, as I'm sure you all are. Just our Instagram, Northern Sustainable Darkroom as well.
And also, it's worth mentioning, because we covered it a little bit in the community fund, the two research papers that we've talked about quite a lot are both available to read digitally. Again, I'll put the links in the YouTube, but if you search them, you will be able to do that, and I'd highly recommend doing it. It's very interesting, and they do not read like dry research papers, I can promise you that.
They're on my research gate, which is like just my name and stuff like that. So, and you can also get them if you click through our Instagram bios and stuff. So
brilliant. We will do that. Well, there we go. So I think definitely looking back at the archive of YouTube videos, if you've enjoyed the conversation so far, where there'll be a lot more detailed topics. That sounds like a cracking place, and then we'll follow you along. It sounds like there's lots of things in the works. Definitely the publication in the next couple of weeks. The darkroom being finished a couple of weeks after that. It's going to be a busy summer.
We're writing a manifesto at the moment as well, aren't we? So
Yeah.
That'll be
brilliant.
One for the end of the month.
Oh, awesome. So again, assuming if people follow your Instagrams, that will all be announced there.
That will all be there, yeah.
Wonderful. Cool. Well, thank you once again. Hugely enlightening. Lots of thank yous are coming in from the people commenting as well, so really, really enjoyable. We will bid you good evening, good luck with the next few stages of the project. We watch with a huge amount of interest and vested interest, because I think the work you're doing will benefit all of us, everyone who's into film photography. So thank you on behalf of the community for that. Good night, and we'll speak to you all soon. Cheers.
Bye.